Okay, everyone, I am very, very pleased to introduce Akinbowale, Akintayo, to our digital lunch series. And we are really excited to have Akin here to present some of his PhD research that he did, particularly because it was such an in-depth study of GIS in the area. And Akin was the postdoc for, do you say Miasem?
Yeah,
Miasem. Yeah, I never know to say it out loud. So mapping Africa's endangered archaeological sites and monuments project. But now has switched to a very prestigious Leverhulme Early Career Fellowship to analyze landscape changes at the Sukur cultural landscape in northern Nigeria. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'll be talking about this topic, mobilithics. And, one of my colleagues in Spain actually was the one who told me about this word. And I loved it and I fell in love with it the first time I heard it. So like mobility analytics. So trying to understand the movement of humans using stone tools that are found from archaeological sites. So today I'm going to be talking about human occupation of southwestern Iberian Peninsula during the Middle Pleistocene using mobilithics. So as a way of introduction, I'm going to be talking about the background to this study. Then I'll be focusing on talking about the study area we have carried out this research. I'll tell you about the methodology that I've used. I'll share my results and discussion and conclusion. So this was actually part of my PhD research. It's not the whole thing, but just part of it that I felt is going to fit into the scope of this digital launch presentation. So I would like to talk about this concept. It's concept of landscape in archaeology. So it's not I'm not going to be going to the theoretical framework of what landscape really is, but within the scope and the context of the work I've carried out, that's what I'll be talking about, the concept of landscape in archaeology. And Sao 925 says landscape emerges when there's interaction between humans and the natural environment, which invariably like so cultural landscape, the culture of a people, when it interacts with the natural environment, which is place, then a cultural landscape emerges. So we can see this picture to the right that talks about the different aspect of landscape in terms of place and people. So within the context of my presentation today is going to be how humans who occupy the southwestern Iberian Peninsula interacted with the natural environments and created a cultural landscape, which I studied and which is still there up to now. So the site that I'll be talking about today has been dated to the Middle Pleistocene. So we can all agree that this site was occupied by the hunter-gatherers. And so I'll just be dwelling a bit about the lifestyle of hunter-gatherer. I'm sure most of us are familiar with, we all know this anyway, but I'm not sure if there are some people on the call who are not archaeologists. So we all know hunter-gatherers, they are subsistence economy revolves around where they have resources available in terms of water, flora, and fauna. So there is like a close relationship between them and the natural environment. And so their subsistence economy focuses on provision of needed resources as a when due. So their activities are sometimes or most times organized around where resources are available. So it means when resources are depleted in a given environment or a given place, they have to move to somewhere else where they can find some other resources. So you find this like movement from a point to several points on the landscape and coming back to some other points where resources are available. So there is this scale of movement to and from different points on the landscape. And within the context of this work, the distance that they travel, depending on how locally resources are available, tend to vary depending on the environment that they found themselves. So I'll be moving to talk about the study area where I've done my work. So the broader area is referred to as the Casareño complex for people who are familiar with the southwestern Iberian Peninsula. So it consists of the municipality of Cáceres and Mapatida de Cáceres, which combines the karstic system, which is the limestone system of the area. So you have this municipality of Cáceres, which is one of the cities in the Spanish Extremadura. And you have the areas referred to as the Mapatida de Cáceres, where you have several granitic boulders and like outcrops in the area. So then within this Casareño complex, you have the Calorito de Cáceres, which is an area of about 14 square kilometers, and it's a karstic complex containing limestone deposits, and it contains one of the most important aquifers of the Spanish Extremadura. And it is within this Calorito de Cáceres that we have found that Santana Cave we will be talking about is located. So you can see the picture of part of the Calorito de Cáceres, and you can see the geological outline of Calorito de Cáceres. So moving on to Santa Ana Cave, which is the cave where I've carried out my work. So it's found within Calorito de Cáceres, within the broader region of Casareño complex. So currently it's found within a military camp in Cáceres. So all the time that we went there for excavations and for survey, there has to be some form of a documentation that needs to be carried out. So it was very difficult to get into this camp. So it is situated within the karstic system of Calorito de Cáceres, and it's about 12 kilometers from the urban nucleus. And this is the picture of the cave. So we have like a roof on top of the cave, and this excavation in this site started in 2000 and it's still ongoing up to this present moment. So it's like about 24 years of continuous excavation of every year. Sometimes we go there twice every year. And you can see the location within the broader Calorito de Cáceres. And some of these archaeological materials that have been found that I've worked with and that some of my other colleagues have worked on from the site. And this is a picture of myself. I think this was in 2017, excavating one of the trenches that in Santa Ana Cave. So inside this cave, so many archaeological materials have been found to date. As at the time I was analyzing the finds, that was in 2016, 2017. So we had a total of about 587 finds containing quartzite, quartz, porphyry, limestone, different materials from different sources. So we have basically worked with the quartzite and the quartz materials that have been excavated from this site. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be talking about just the quartz materials, not the quartz, just the quartzite rather, not the quartz. So to sum up, Casareño complex is the broader area. Then you have the Calorito de Cáceres within the Casareño complex. Then you have Santa Ana Cave. So Santa Ana Cave within Calorito de Cáceres and Calorito de Cáceres within Casareño complex. So I'm moving on to talk about the hydrology of the area. So generally, the Iberian Peninsula is drained by three major river basins. You have the Douro, you have the Tahoe, and you have the Ebro. But this particular area, the Spanish Extremadura, is drained by the Tahoe river basin, and you have like several rivers. So one of them that we're talking about is Salo Reservoir, which is found towards the southwestern part of Santa Ana Cave. And you can see a picture of part of the Salo Reservoir. Then towards the north, so you have this area called the Marco River. This is actually one of the rivers. It's a river that is very important within the context of this study area. Then we have so apart from this, we have this the Agua Biba stream. I don't have the picture here, but it's like a seasonal stream just beside the Marco River. And it's very important to be speaking about it when I'm talking about my results. And in front of Santa Ana Cave, there's a stream. Well, on this picture was taken, it was dry, so it means a seasonal stream, so it only gets filled when there's rain. So at this time, there were no rain, so it was dry. And within the cave, Santa Ana Cave, we have like a stream that flows within the cave. So this is a picture. So we had to like crawl inside to see this. But when this picture was taken it was during the dry season, so there was no water there. But it speaks to several areas where water can be found within the broader region of the Calareto de Cáceres, particularly with reference to the Santa Ana Cave. So moving on to the geological structure, you have like a complex geological map of the area. So you have all the plutonic rocks that you can see there. But like I said, for the purpose of this, I'll be focusing on the granitic, quartzite, and quartz materials. But you can see the geological structure of the area. You can see here where you have Santa Ana Cave within the Calareto de Cáceres, which is the limestone region of Casereño complex. And there you can see part of a picture of some of the quartzite deposits. And this is actually from part of the Casereño complex that I've looked at for my work. So the question that arose when I was doing my PhD was where there are needed resources, where they're locally available. Why should people move? If, for instance, everything I need, I can find them in this room, why should I move? It's just like a question. And, some people have said, okay, maybe probably I might say, well, I'm in this room, I have everything I need, but maybe this computer that I'm using, I don't like it anymore. I just want to get another computer so I can try to go elsewhere. So the assumption is like where the needed resources are, people normally not move. That's not really true anyway. But just bear that in mind as I continue. So the hypothesis is Calareto de Cáceres in Iberian Peninsula, a place where human groups would have settled from Paleolithic to Neolithic periods. So this was one of the questions I wanted to answer for my PhD, and I'll get to it shortly. So for the methodology, what I did was I did landscape prospecting for lithic raw materials sources. Then I did macroscopic characterization of lithic samples and archaeological samples as well. Then I did some spatial analysis. So for the landscape prospecting, what did I do? I showed you initially the geological map of the area, but because of my area of interest, I was interested in quartzite and quartz materials that have been found in Santa Ana Cave. So what I had to do was to delineate the areas on the landscape where you can only have geological, where you have quartz and quartzitic deposits alone, because that's what I'm interested in. So in total, the area I surveyed was about 605 square kilometers. And you can see, so this to your left, you can see the geological structure of the area, and to your right, you can see just the extraction of the geological, the quartzite and quartz deposit within the Calareto de Cáceres and Casereño complex. And these are the areas that I surveyed for what that I went to collect material samples from. So after I've deleted this geological map to show me just the quartz and the quartzite deposits, I made use of topographic and geological maps for prospecting purposes. Then I used the GPS for locational to get locational data. Then I used the prospecting form that was designed for the purpose of the field work to get this information on the field. So for the macroscopic characterization, so I did macroscopic characterization for both the archaeological samples and for the geological samples based on some variables. So the first one was texture of the raw material samples and the archaeological samples. Then the luster, then the translucency, then surface condition of the materials, archaeological materials, then color. So for the color, I use the Monsell color chart, and for all the other macroscopic variables, characteristics, I use a light microscope. So for spatial analysis, the Spanish government they have this LiDAR for the whole of Spain, so which is about like a 5-meter resolution, which was quite good. So I was able to use that for my work, and all my work then was carried out in ArcMap. And I tried to use the coordinate reference system adopted by the Spanish government, which is the ETRS 1989, for the sake of consistency. Then when I was constructing my digital elevation model, I made sure I removed all the zero value, which are like all the negative values, so it won't impact my results. Then I generated A-shade, slope, aspect, backlink, and elevation rasters, which I used for the analysis that I'm going to talking about shortly. Then the assumption was that Santa Ana Cave is the origin point, and all the other points we have collected samples, like several places on the landscape where you can find these geological outcrops at the destination point. So people move from Santa Ana to go to all these points to collect raw material samples that were used to fashion tools that were found in Santa Ana Cave. So the shapefile of drainage pattern and geology area, which are the vector data, were incorporated into the analysis. Then what I did was to carry out a least cost path analysis to calculate the distance going to take from Santa Ana to all the various points on the landscape. Then I use the top hiking distance to calculate the time it's going to take to walk from Santa Ana to all the points on the landscape. Then I attempted a model of landscape use. So the results, like I said, the first thing I did was landscape prospecting. And so in total, I was able to identify 20 sources of raw or quartzite raw materials within the landscape we have surveyed, that you can see all the points of where I visited on the landscape to collect raw material samples. So the first area, so you can see several sources that were visited. And the first area is the Sierra de Agua Bibas areas, where like four sources, 1, 2, 3, 4, were found, and you can see the pictures like to your right. And the second area is the Sierra de la Mosca area, which is just like down to Sierra de Agua Bibas. And the other area is like the Harbor de Robo and Santa Ana Hill, like two different sites, two different regions, like just to the right and the left of Santa Ana Cave. I can see all the sources there. And the last one is the along the Salo River, where only one sample was found based on the archaeological assemblage of Santa Ana. Then I moved on to the macroscopic characterization of the material. So you can see this bar graphs, actually, this bar charts show you the quartz and the quartzite sample. So just focus to the right at the quartzite, to the left the quartz. So this, in terms of the texture, luster, translucency, and color of geological samples, these are the results. So in terms of the texture, we have fine-grained and coarse-grained quartzite. In terms of luster, you have dull for quartzite. I'm not talking about quartz. In terms of translucency, we're talking about opaque, which most of the samples actually have. And then color of the samples, we have light gray, dark gray, greenish gray, and the ones that cannot be determined. So one particular source that caught our attention was the source from the Salo River channel, which is source 5. So you can see that it's like the farthest from Santa Ana Cave. And you can see this picture too. So this is the outcrop here. This one is okay. This one is the sample that was taken from this outcrop, and this is actually archaeological material that was found in Santa Ana Cave, which while looking at it, you can see that this particular material was from this outcrop. It's quite distinct because it's the only one that has this kind of characteristic. And towards the Sierra de Agua Bibas areas, you can see that the distinct quartzite that we have in this area have this quartz vein within them. So this material here is one of the archaeological materials from Santa Ana Cave, and you can see this outcrop. So you can see them, and you can see this quartz vein within them. So we try to attribute where these source materials would have come from on the landscape. So this was actually attributed to the areas in Sierra de Agua Bibas area. And this, along the Harbor of the Robo area, you find this archaeological material which has been attributed to this source around the Harbor of the Robo area. So this is just like three samples from all the archaeological material that I found, in just to like show you the source, the archaeological material, and the outcrop. So in terms of comparing them in terms of color, archaeological materials and geological samples. So you have these colors: brown, light gray, dark gray, greenish gray. And you have the percentage of archaeological materials that I looked at in terms of quartzite. In total, the quartzite I looked at was about 189 archaeological samples. So 4.5% of them they have their brine color, 6.2 light gray, 7.1 dark gray, and most of them are greenish gray. So if you see the first one, sources 1, 2, and 3, they were actually around the Sierra de Agua Bibas area. And you can find the second one, which is the Sierra de la Mosca area. We have sources 9, 10, and 11. And you have the Arc of the Rubble and Santa Ana Hill, where you have most of the sources, well, which is not far-fetched because they are the closest sources to the site. And the last one is just source 5, which is this material that I talked about that is from the Salo River area, which is quite distinct in terms of the poor quality of the material. So that was the macroscopic characterization and landscape prospecting. So I moved on to the spatial analysis. So for the least cost path analysis, try to so it's from Santa Ana Cave to all the various sources of the landscape where you can find this raw material. So we can see after the analysis have been carried out. So I try to vectorize the raster data that came out from the analysis, and that's why you have this these lines from Santa Ana, which is here, to different sources on the landscape where you can find these materials. But least cost path normally would always want to use a river valley where you have sources of water when you're doing the analysis, and you can see that example here. So this is like a slope. This is actually you have a stream, and you see that this particular analysis, the first one I did, like passed through here. So what I did was to vary the analysis, to remove source of water from the analysis that I did, and that was when I now got this. But eventually I found out that it doesn't really make any difference. So the distance is still about 15 kilometers, whether it's from this side or this side. But the idea is that this cost path, you always like want to pass through water, but sometimes it's not always the case. So I try to look at, if it passes through water, what will I get? If I remove water from my analysis, sources of water from the from the variables that I've used. So that was when I got this. But like I said, they're both like more or less the same in terms of the distance. Is going to take distance from Santa Ana to this particular point, which is source 5 here. So this is just like an enlargement of what you have here. So you have the Arc of the Rubble and the Santa Ana area, Santa Ana and different areas on the landscape where we have gone to prospect the landscape and the sources. And that's the first one is the Sierra de Agua Bibas area, followed by the Sierra de la Mosca area, above the Rubble and Santa Ana Hill. And here you have the El Millar area. So I'll still be talking about this one. I've not talked about it before, but I'll mention it in the course of my presentation. And the last one is the Salo River area. So you have like 5 different areas on the landscape where archaeological materials from Santa Ana Cave would have probably come from based on the prospecting that we did. So the other one, so least cost path calculates the distance from one point to the other. And that's what we've seen. But tabular hiking function, what I've used it for to calculate the time is going to take to travel from Santa Ana to all the other points. So you can see here, so you have it, the isochrone in terms of, so you can see Santa Ana Cave, and you can see all these isochrones, which actually stands for time is going to take. So you can see the legend here, the time is going to take from Santa Ana to all this. So this particular source 5, you can see here it's about 5 hours, which is the farthest source to Santa Ana Cave. You have areas about 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 1 hour, depending on the area of the landscape where these sources are located. So Sierra de Agua Bibas area, 4 of them. Sierra de la Mosca, above the Rubble and Santa Ana Hill, the El Millar area, and the Salo River Channel. And so what I did was to combine both results to show the least cost path analysis and the tabular hiking function to show the distance and the time it's going to take from Santa Ana to all these points. So for the first area, which is the Sierra de Agua Biba areas, The distance from Santa Ana to this area is about 8 kilometers, and it's going to take about 3 to 4.5 hours to walk from Santa Ana to this point. The second area, which is the Sierra de la Mosca area, the distance from Santa Ana to this point is about 4 kilometers, and it's going to take about 1.25 to 2.5 hours to walk from Santa Ana to this point. And the third area, which is about above the Rubble and the Santa Ana Hill, they are like about less than 1 kilometer to Santa Ana. And for the harbor, the Rubble is going to take about 30 minutes to walk from Santa Ana to the point on the landscape where you find these geological outcrops. And for the Santa Ana Hill, it's going to take about 1 to 2 hours. So, but still, it's less than 1 kilometer. But because of the nature of the elevation, that's why you have Santa Ana Hill having people to travel 1 to 2 hours before they can get there. And for the Helmiya area, it's going to take about 7 kilometers from Santa Ana, and travel time is going to be about 2.5 hours. And Salou area, which is the farthest source, is the distance from Santa Ana to this point is about 14 kilometers, and it's going to take about approximately 5 hours to travel to this area. So in total, like the radius of occupation, or the radius of based on the information that I was able to gather from my work, the area radius of operation did not exist 15 kilometers, which is, like I said, the farthest area is the Salou River area, which is about 14 kilometers from Santa Ana, and it's going to take about 5 hours to travel there. So in terms of discussion, so I found out that procurement of raw materials for stone tool production did not exceed radius of 15 kilometers. So all the archaeological materials I studied from Santa Ana Cave, I was able to localize them to all these sources within these outcrops, within this local environment of Calareto de Carteret. So none of them extend beyond this radius of 15 kilometers. Then both materials from source outcrops and alluvial materials were used to fashion stone tools, as it's expected, because you have several hills. So you'll have expected like materials to just like free fall of materials, or might be stream carrying raw materials, and people could have just unpicked them. So you have material from both source outcrops and from alluvial materials. And thirdly, you can see that sources that are close to the site were exploited better compared to distant resources, as is evident that sources from Santa Ana Hill and above the Rubble, which the distance is less than 1 kilometer, they were exploited more compared to other sources, particularly the Salou River area that were only just one source. Apart from the fact that it's very far from the site, another thing that it's the poorest material that people can fashion stone tools from. It's a very the grains are very terrible, so that when you just take the source, when you break it breaks off easily. So there's no way they could have been able to fashion any stone tools from there. Then, and that's what I've just explained. Outcome of poor quality were not exploited as everything from the material study. And distance played a major role in the procurement of raw materials. So sources that were close to the site were exploited more compared to, and even though the sources like Sierra de Agua Vivas, which is about which is going to take about 3 or 4.5 hours to get there, we still have some materials from there. But the reason that we attributed to this is that because that area, apart from the fact that it has quality outcrops where materials could be gotten, you have availability of water almost every time. That's where you have the Marco River and where you have the Sierra de Agua Vivas. So there are like riparian forests along this and gallery forests around this area where we expect that maybe probably games would have been hunted at those times too. So I should be done in like five minutes. So I try to do like a landscape use and occupation model. So we can see that the radius of occupation around this Santa Ana Hill, Sierra de Agua Vivas combined with the Sierra de la Mosca and this El Milla area. So I was talking about the El Milla area the other time because 2 other sites have been found in this area. That's where you have the Vendimia and the El Milla. So you can see those 2 sites here. And this is the area of the Mapatida de Cáceres, where you have like granitic boulders, like big boulders that maybe probably I'll be talking about in my next slide. And you have this area, the Salou River area too, where we have found outcrops of quartz. But because I'm not talking about quartz, so I'm just going to skip that. So activities are conditioned to different loci in the landscape. So depending on what they can get in different areas, whether it is stone tools, whether it is animals, whether it is water. So we can see that the landscape reflects several portions of the landscape have different available resources where the humans would have exploited in the Middle Pleistocene. The riparian forests along the Marco River and the Agua Bibas area would have provided games for either scavenging or hunting and for meat procurement. And presence of granitic boulder in Mapasada de Cáceres would have provided temporary shelter during logistic mobility. And the reason why I said this is that because the area of Santa Ana Cape, you have the Armorican quartzite, which is a quartzite of very high quality. So Santa Ana Hill and the Harcourt the Rubble area, they have this particular kind of quartz. And that's why you can see that most of the materials that we have found in excavation were actually from these two sources. So within the context of this source areas, so you have like a region of 1.5 kilometers from Santa Ana. Within here, you have this source which is about like a radius of 1.5 kilometers from Santa Ana. Another one in the Sierra de la Mosca area, and to the Sierra de Agua Bibas, it does not extend beyond 6 kilometers. Here, it does not extend beyond 5 kilometers. And within the Vendimia, El Milla, and the Salor River area, it does not exceed beyond 7 kilometers. So the assumption is that people would have probably traveled from Santa Ana Cave to different parts of the landscape, particularly when they come to this area of Salor River. And that's why we have found two other new sites, Vendimia and El Milla, because this area have granite boulders that will have provided temporary accommodation for people when they move about trying to source for resources. And different areas have been, well, I've already explained this, 1.5 kilometers and like 15 kilometers. And so in conclusion, so the study of Santa Ana assemblage and their procurement strategy has shown that Clariso de Cáceres and the surrounding environment was a place endowed in quotes with basic resources which could have necessitated human occupation of the area over a long period of time. So in Clariso de Cáceres, we have 3 cave sites. I looked at Santa Ana cave site. We have Machevieso and we have the Herconia cave. So these 2 different caves have different chronologies. But it has been found that within this Clariso de Cáceres, Santa Ana cave is like the oldest cave. And according to the material that we dated, it was about 123,000 years ago. But there's no break in the occupation of Santa Ana cave. So when we move to Matraverso, which has like a contemporary Neolithic materials, we have several rock arts. And when you go to Erconia, so we found that we're able to base our assumption on the fact that these 3 cave sites in Clariso de Cáceres, there was no break in occupations from Santa Ana to Matraverso to Erconia. So it points to the fact that people of human occupation have always been in this area from Middle Pleistocene to the current times, or to Neolithic times when those cave sites were discovered. So I've spoken about the logistic movement, moving from one point to the other, and Mapasada de Cáceres with the structure of the landscape would have provided accommodation for people, or temporary accommodation when they go about trying to look for resources in other aspects of other parts of Caserio complex. And yeah, so since the movement are resource driven, so they only go to areas where they can find resources, and that explains why you have different areas on the landscape where their imprints have been left behind. So I'd like to acknowledge so many people, or so many. Yes, the first one is my home institution, University of Ibadan, where I did my bachelor's and master's degree. I want to thank the Erasmus Mundus for giving me the scholarship to do my PhD under the European Union Commission grant. My universities, Universidad Rovira y Virgili in Tarragona, Spain, and Universidad degli Studi di Ferrara in Italy. Those are the 2 universities where I did my PhD. And the name of the grant I won for my PhD is the International Doctorate in Quaternary and Prehistory. And so the working group that I worked with for my project in Extremadura, we call them the Equipo de Investigación Primeros Pobladores de Extremadura. So they're my research group. And IPES is a unit in my university where I worked, although it's within Universidad Rovira y Virgili. So I want to appreciate all one of them. And I want to thank you all for coming and for listening. Thank you.
so very much.